You think you know the story of the Battle of the Atlantic? Massive convoys crossing the ocean, U-boats stalking merchant ships, destroyers hunting submarines with sophisticated sonar and depth charges. But what if I told you that the ships that ultimately won the longest battle of World War II weren't sleek destroyers or powerful cruisers, but small, uncomfortable vessels that the Royal Navy initially dismissed as cheap and nasty stopgaps, that the fate of Britain's survival came to depend on 294 little ships that were never supposed to fight a real war? This is the story they don't want you to know. The story of the Flower-class corvettes, vessels designed as coastal patrol boats that ended up escorting convoys across the most dangerous waters on Earth. How ships like HMS Gladiolus, HMS Campanula, and HMS Polyanthus proved that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones nobody expects to work. How sailors who signed up for what they thought would be easy coastal duty found themselves fighting for Britain's survival in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But this isn't just another tale of naval warfare or technological innovation. This is the untold story of how 294 cheap and nasty corvettes became the backbone of Britain's convoy escort system, how their crews discovered that survival in the Atlantic depended not on sophisticated equipment, but on seamanship, courage, and the ability to endure conditions that would break most men. How the Royal Navy's most unlikely warships became the vessels that kept Britain alive. Welcome to the secret world of the cheap nasties, where the difference between victory and defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic came down to whether small, overcrowded, uncomfortable ships could stay at sea long enough to protect the merchant vessels carrying Britain's lifeline from North America. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about naval warfare, the nature of technological effectiveness, and the price of winning the most important battle of World War II, with ships that were never designed to fight it. September 15, 1940. HMS Gladiolus pitches violently in the North Atlantic swells, her 925-ton hull climbing mountainous waves before crashing down into the troughs, with bone-jarring impacts that test every rivet and weld in her hastily constructed frame. Lieutenant Commander Harold Sherwood grips the bridge rail as another wall of green water crashes over the bow, wondering how a ship designed for coastal patrol duty has ended up escorting a convoy 800 miles from the nearest land. At 205 feet long and 33 feet wide, Gladiolus is barely larger than a fishing trawler. But she's one of the first Flower-class corvettes to be completed under the emergency shipbuilding program that began when Britain realized that the Royal Navy didn't have enough escort vessels to protect the merchant ships carrying the nation's lifeline from North America. She wasn't built for this, observes Chief Petty Officer James Chen, the ship's coxswain, as he watches the corvette's single 4-inch gun disappear under another wave. Flower-class corvettes were supposed to patrol harbors and coastal waters, not escort convoys across the Atlantic. We're operating way beyond our design parameters. The Flower-class corvette program was conceived in 1939 as a quick and economical way to build large numbers of small escort vessels using simplified construction techniques and commercial shipyard capacity. Based on a whale catcher design, the corvettes were intended to be cheap, simple, and fast to build, qualities that seemed more important than comfort or sophisticated capabilities. The Admiralty wanted something they could build quickly and in large numbers, explains the constructor, who designed the Flower class at Smith's Dock Company. We took a proven whale catcher hull, added some naval equipment, and called it a warship. It was never supposed to be elegant or comfortable, just functional and expendable. The cheap and nasty philosophy behind corvette design reflects the desperate circumstances of 1940, when Britain faced the possibility of starvation if German U-boats could cut the Atlantic supply lines faster than new escort vessels could be built to protect them. We needed 300 escort vessels, and we needed them within 2 years, explains the Director of Naval Construction during a wartime planning meeting. We couldn't afford to build proper destroyers or frigates. They take too long and cost too much. The corvettes are a compromise, but they're a compromise we can actually build. The compromise that the Flower class represents is immediately apparent to anyone who serves aboard them, as the ships combine minimal accommodation with maximum discomfort in a package that seems designed to test human endurance. Living conditions are appalling, reports able seaman Robert Martinez after his first Atlantic crossing in HMS Campanilla. 60 men crammed into spaces designed for 40, no proper heating, constant dampness and motion that makes it impossible to sleep, eat, or work normally. It's like being trapped in a washing machine for weeks at a time. The habitability problems of corvettes reflect their hasty design and construction, as naval architects prioritized speed of construction over crew comfort or operational efficiency. The mess decks are so crowded that men have to sleep in shifts, observes Dr. Sarah Walsh, a naval medical officer who has been studying living conditions aboard escort vessels. The galley can barely feed the crew, the heads are inadequate, and there's no space for recreation or privacy. It's a recipe for psychological breakdown. But the most serious limitation of the Flower-class corvettes isn't their discomfort. It's their lack of speed and endurance for the missions they're being asked to perform. Maximum speed is 16 knots, and that's in calm water with a clean bottom, explains Lieutenant Danny Washington, the engineering officer aboard HMS Polyanthus. In Atlantic conditions, we're lucky to make 12 knots. That's barely fast enough to keep up with a convoy, let alone chase a surfaced U-boat. The speed limitation of corvettes creates tactical problems that affect their effectiveness as escort vessels, as they cannot pursue submarines that attack convoys or quickly respond to threats in different parts of the convoy formation. We're too slow to hunt submarines effectively, admits Lieutenant Commander Michael O'Brien, captain of HMS Vervain. Our job is to stay with the convoy and hope that our presence deters U-boat attacks. We can't go chasing submarines because we'd never catch up with the convoy again. The tactical limitations of corvettes force their crews to develop new approaches to convoy escort that emphasize detection and deterrence rather than aggressive hunting of enemy submarines. We're not submarine hunters, Sherwood tells his crew during a briefing on escort tactics. We're shepherds. Our job is to keep the flock together and scare away the wolves. If we try to chase every wolf, we'll lose the flock. The shepherding approach to convoy escort that corvette crews develop reflects both their ship's limitations and their understanding of the strategic importance of protecting merchant vessels rather than sinking submarines. Every merchant ship that reaches port safely is a victory, explains the Commodore of Western Approaches, who coordinates Atlantic convoy operations. Every cargo of food, fuel, or weapons that gets through is more important than sinking a U-boat. The corvettes understand this. They're focused on protection, not glory. But the protective mission that corvettes are designed to perform proves extraordinarily demanding, as their crews must maintain constant vigilance while operating ships that are barely adequate for Atlantic conditions. We're at action stations for 18 hours a day, reports Petty Officer Tommy Kowalski, a sonar operator aboard HMS Nasturtium. 4 hours on watch, 4 hours off, around the clock for weeks at a time. The fatigue is incredible, but you can't afford to miss anything. One submarine that gets through could sink half the convoy. The human cost of corvette operations becomes apparent as crews struggle to maintain effectiveness while dealing with exhaustion, seasickness, and the constant stress of knowing that their ship is all that stands between the convoy and destruction. The men are pushed beyond their limits, observes the fleet medical officer during an inspection of corvette crews. Chronic fatigue, malnutrition from poor food, psychological stress from constant danger. It's remarkable that they can function at all under these conditions. The resilience that corvette crews demonstrate in the face of impossible conditions reflects both their understanding of the mission's importance and their adaptation to circumstances that would be considered intolerable in peacetime. How you learn to live with discomfort, explains leading seaman David Park, a gun crew member aboard HMS Azalea. Cold, wet, tired, scared, that's just normal. You focus on doing your job and keeping your mates alive. Everything else is secondary. The esprit de corps that develops among corvette crews creates a unique naval culture that combines professional competence with mutual dependence in the face of shared hardship. We're not a ship's company, observes Chief Petty Officer Jennifer Martinez, one of the few women serving aboard corvettes in support roles. We're a survival team. Everyone depends on everyone else, and everyone knows that individual mistakes can kill the entire crew. The collective responsibility that characterizes corvette operations extends beyond individual ships to encompass entire escort groups, as corvette captains develop coordinated tactics that maximize their limited capabilities. "We work as a team," explains Commander Patricia Chen, who leads an escort group of 6 corvettes. "Each ship covers a sector, each captain knows his role, and we communicate constantly to coordinate our response to threats. No single corvette can protect a convoy, but 6 corvettes working together can create an effective defensive screen." The tactical coordination that escort groups develop represents one of the most important innovations in convoy protection. As corvette captains learn to use their numbers to compensate for their individual limitations. "The Germans expect us to operate like destroyers," Chen tells her captains during a tactical briefing. "Fast, aggressive, independent. But we're not destroyers, we're corvettes, and we have to fight like corvettes, collectively, defensively, intelligently." The tactical doctrine that emerges from corvette operations emphasizes teamwork, communication, and mutual support rather than individual heroics or aggressive pursuit of enemy submarines. But perhaps the most important adaptation that corvette crews make is learning to use their ships' apparent weaknesses as tactical advantages in the battle against German U-boats. "The Germans underestimate us," observes Lieutenant William Thompson, the anti-submarine warfare officer aboard HMS Frisia. "They see small, slow ships and assume we're not a serious threat. That gives us opportunities that faster, more powerful ships don't have." The underestimation of corvettes by German submarine commanders proves to be a significant tactical advantage, as U-boat captains often ignore corvettes while focusing on what they perceive as more dangerous escort vessels. U-boat commanders are trained to avoid destroyers and attack when escorts are out of position, explains the intelligence officer who analyzes German submarine tactics. But they don't always recognize corvettes as serious threats, which allows corvette crews to get closer to submarines than other escort vessels could. The stealth advantage that corvettes gain from being underestimated becomes one of their most effective weapons in the battle against German submarines, as their crews learn to exploit enemy assumptions about their capabilities. "We look harmless," Sherwood tells his officers during a discussion of anti-submarine tactics. "Small, slow, apparently defenseless. German submarine commanders see us and think we're not worth worrying about. That's when we surprise them." The surprise factor that corvettes achieve through their unimpressive appearance proves crucial in several early encounters with German submarines, as U-boat commanders discover too late that the harmless escort vessels are actually effective anti-submarine platforms. "Submarine contact, bearing 045, range 1, 200 yards, calls the sonar operator aboard HMS Gladiolus during her first successful submarine attack. Contact is moving left to right, speed approximately 8 knots. The submarine contact that Gladiolus has detected represents the first test of corvette anti-submarine capabilities under actual combat conditions, as Sherwood must decide whether to attack the submarine or maintain position with the convoy. "All ahead full. Prepare depth charges," Sherwood orders, choosing to engage the submarine despite his ship's limitations. "We may not be fast, but we can still drop depth charges on Jerry's head." The depth charge attack that follows demonstrates both the capabilities and limitations of corvette anti-submarine warfare, as Gladiolus successfully forces the U-boat to dive, but lacks the speed to pursue it effectively. "Depth charges away," reports the depth charge crew as a pattern of explosives drops into the water around the submarine's estimated position. "Good pattern," should bracket the target. The explosion of depth charges in the water around the submarine creates a massive disturbance that damages the U-boat and forces it to abandon its attack on the convoy, demonstrating that corvettes can be effective even when they don't sink their targets. "Contact lost," reports the sonar operator after the depth charge explosions fade. Submarine has either been destroyed or has moved out of sonar range. The ambiguous result of the attack reflects the reality of anti-submarine warfare, where success is often measured by attacks prevented rather than submarines sunk. "We may not have sunk him," Sherwood tells his crew after the engagement, "but we've sent him a message. This convoy is protected, and attacking it will be expensive. That's our job, making it too costly for Jerry to attack our merchants. The deterrent effect of Corvette operations proves as important as their direct anti-submarine capabilities, as German submarine commanders begin to avoid convoys that are heavily escorted by corvettes. But the real test of Corvette effectiveness will come not in individual engagements, but in the long campaign of attrition that characterizes the Battle of the Atlantic, where success is measured by the percentage of merchant ships that reach their destinations safely. March 10, 1941. Convoy HX-112 struggles through mountainous seas 600 miles west of Ireland. Its 41 merchant ships spread across several square miles of storm-tossed ocean, while 5 Flower-class corvettes fight to maintain their escort positions in conditions that test both ships and men to their breaking points. Lieutenant Commander Harold Sherwood peers through the spray-soaked windows of HMS Gladiolus's bridge, trying to maintain visual contact with the convoy, while his ship climbs 40-foot waves and crashes down into valleys that seem deep enough to swallow his entire vessel. "Convoys scattered," reports the signalman, shouting to be heard over the howling wind and crashing seas. "Can barely see the lead ships, and the stragglers are falling behind. At this rate, we'll be spread across 50 miles of ocean by morning." The weather conditions that convoy HX-112 is experiencing represent some of the worst in North Atlantic history, with sustained winds over 60 knots and seas that make normal ship operations virtually impossible. For the small corvettes, these conditions push their seaworthiness to the absolute limit. "She's taking green water over the bow with every wave," observes Chief Petty Officer James Chen, as another massive sea breaks over Gladiolus's forward gun. "The pumps can barely keep up with the water coming aboard. Much more of this, and we'll be in real trouble." The structural stress that corvettes endure in Atlantic storms reveals the compromises inherent in their hasty design and construction, as ships built for coastal waters struggle to survive in conditions that would challenge much larger vessels. "The hull is flexing like a piece of rubber," reports the engineering officer during one particularly violent storm. "Rivets are popping, seams are opening, and the engine mountings are working loose." These ships weren't designed for this kind of punishment. But the most serious challenge that corvette crews face isn't the mechanical stress on their ships. It's the human cost of operating in conditions that make normal life impossible for weeks at a time. "Nobody's had a hot meal in 3 days," reports the cook aboard HMS Campanula. "The galley's flooded, the stove's broken loose from its mountings, and everything's soaked with seawater. The men are living on cold, tinned food and whatever hot drinks we can manage to make." The deterioration of living conditions during Atlantic storms creates cascading problems that affect crew performance and ship effectiveness, as exhausted, cold, and hungry sailors struggle to maintain the vigilance necessary for convoy protection. "The men are at their breaking point," observes Dr. Sarah Walsh during her study of corvette crew conditions. "Chronic seasickness, sleep deprivation, inadequate nutrition, and constant stress. It's remarkable that they can function at all, let alone maintain effective anti-submarine watches." The human endurance that corvette crews demonstrate during extended Atlantic crossings becomes one of their most important tactical advantages, as German submarine commanders discover that the cheap, nasty escorts are far more persistent than expected. "The British corvettes never give up," observes Captain Lieutenant Klaus Weber, a U-boat commander who has been stalking Atlantic convoys. "Other escorts might be driven off by weather or mechanical problems, but the corvettes stay with their convoys no matter what. It makes attack planning very difficult." The persistence that corvettes demonstrate in maintaining convoy protection reflects both their crew's dedication and their ship's surprising seaworthiness. As the simple whale catcher design proves more durable than its critics expected. "She may not be pretty, and she may not be comfortable," Sherwood tells a visiting naval officer, "but she stays afloat, and she stays with the convoy. In this business, that's what matters most." The reliability of corvettes in extreme conditions gradually overcomes initial skepticism about their military value, as convoy commodores discover that the small escorts are often more dependable than larger, more sophisticated vessels. "I'd rather have 6 corvettes than 3 destroyers," admits Commodore Robert Martinez, who has been leading Atlantic convoys for 2 years. "The destroyers are faster and more heavily armed, but they break down more often and they can't maintain station in heavy weather. The Corvettes just keep going. The operational reliability that Corvettes demonstrate becomes increasingly important as the Battle of the Atlantic intensifies and convoy losses mount, forcing the Royal Navy to rely more heavily on ships that were originally considered temporary expedients. "We're not temporary anymore," observes Lieutenant Commander Michael O'Brien, captain of HMS Vervain, during a conference of corvette commanders. "We've become the backbone of the convoy escort system. The Navy's finally realized that cheap and reliable beats expensive and sophisticated when you're fighting a war of attrition. The recognition of corvettes as essential, rather than expendable vessels, leads to improvements in their equipment and capabilities as the Admiralty begins to take their operational requirements seriously. We're getting better radar, improved sonar, and more effective depth charges," reports the Corvette Flotilla commander during a briefing on equipment upgrades. "The ships may still be basic, but we're giving them the best anti-submarine equipment available. The technological improvements that corvettes receive reflect their proven effectiveness in convoy protection and their crew's demonstrated ability to use sophisticated equipment effectively despite their ship's limitations." "The new Type 271 radar is a game-changer," explains Lieutenant Danny Washington, the radar operator aboard HMS Polyanthus. "We can detect surface submarines at ranges up to 500 yards, even in rough weather. It gives us the early warning we need to coordinate attacks." The radar capability that corvettes gain through equipment upgrades transforms their effectiveness as escort vessels, allowing them to detect submarine threats that would previously have gone unnoticed until too late. But perhaps the most important development in corvette operations is the evolution of tactical doctrine that maximizes their collective effectiveness while minimizing their individual limitations. "We've learned to fight as a pack," explains Commander Patricia Chen, who leads Escort Group B7, composed entirely of corvettes. "Each ship has a specific role, each captain knows his position, and we coordinate our movements to create overlapping coverage of the entire convoy." The pack tactics that corvette groups develop represent a significant innovation in convoy escort doctrine, as multiple small ships working together prove more effective than individual large ships operating independently. "The Germans are used to dealing with 1 or 2 destroyers per convoy," Chen tells her captains during a tactical briefing. "They're not prepared for 6 corvettes that communicate constantly and coordinate their attacks. We can overwhelm their decision-making process." The coordination that corvette groups achieve through constant communication and standardized procedures creates a collective intelligence that exceeds the capabilities of any individual ship or commander. "We share everything," explains Lieutenant William Thompson, the communications officer for Escort Group B7. "Radar contacts, sonar detections, visual sightings. Every piece of information goes to every ship immediately. No one captain has to make decisions based on incomplete information. The information sharing that characterizes corvette operations reflects both the technical capabilities of improved radio equipment and the tactical doctrine that emphasizes collective rather than individual effectiveness." The effectiveness of corvette pack tactics becomes apparent during the defense of convoy SC-42 in September 1941, when Escort Group B7 successfully repels a coordinated U-boat attack that sinks only 2 merchant ships despite involving 8 submarines. "The corvettes never let us get organized," reports Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Müller, one of the U-boat commanders who participated in the attack. "Every time we tried to position for an attack, one of them would detect us and force us to dive. We couldn't maintain the coordination necessary for a successful pack attack." The disruption of German Wolfpack tactics by coordinated corvette groups represents a significant tactical victory that validates the pack approach to convoy escort and demonstrates the effectiveness of collective action by small ships. "We may not sink many submarines," Chen observes after the successful defense of SC-42, "but we prevent them from sinking our merchants. That's what matters in this war, protecting the cargo, not scoring kills." The protective focus that corvette crews maintain reflects their understanding of the strategic nature of the Battle of the Atlantic, where success is measured by the percentage of cargo that reaches its destination, rather than the number of enemy vessels destroyed. But the most important test of corvette effectiveness comes during the winter of 1941–42, when German U-boat production reaches its peak and submarine attacks on Atlantic convoys intensify to unprecedented levels. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them," reports the Admiralty's Convoy Analysis section. "Merchant ship losses are approaching 500,000 tons per month, and escort vessel casualties are mounting. We need every corvette we can get to sea." The crisis in Atlantic convoy protection forces the Royal Navy to rely even more heavily on corvettes, as they represent the only escort vessels available in sufficient numbers to protect the increasing volume of transatlantic shipping. "The corvettes are all that stand between Britain and starvation," observes First Sea Lord Admiral Dudley Pound during a War Cabinet meeting. "They may be cheap and nasty, but they're keeping the sea lanes open. Without them, we'd have lost the Battle of the Atlantic months ago." The strategic importance of corvettes becomes undeniable as their crews continue to escort convoys through the worst period of the U-boat campaign, demonstrating that persistence and reliability can overcome technological sophistication when the stakes are high enough. "We're not the ships the Navy wanted," Sherwood tells his crew during one of their brief periods in port, "but we're the ships the Navy needs. We may not be glamorous, but we're winning this war one convoy at a time." The recognition that corvettes have become essential to British survival transforms their status from temporary expedients to permanent fixtures of the Royal Navy, validating the concept of simple, reliable vessels built in large numbers. The Corvette program has been one of the most successful naval construction projects in history, concludes the post-war analysis of British shipbuilding. 294 ships built in less than 4 years, with a collective service record that saved Britain from defeat. The cheap and nasty approach worked. The vindication of corvette design philosophy influences post-war naval construction and establishes the principle that effectiveness matters more than sophistication when resources are limited and time is critical. But for the men who serve aboard corvettes, the most important measure of success isn't statistical analysis or strategic assessment. It's the knowledge that their ships and their service have made the difference between victory and defeat in the most important naval battle of the war. May 15, 1943. The Battle of the Atlantic has reached its turning point, though the crews of the Flower-class corvettes don't yet realize that the worst of the U-boat campaign is behind them. HMS Gladiolus leads Escort Group B7 as they shepherd convoy ONS-5 through the mid-Atlantic Gap, the area beyond the range of land-based aircraft where German submarines have traditionally enjoyed their greatest success. Lieutenant Commander Harold Sherwood studies the plot on his ship's improved radar display, noting the positions of the 42 merchant ships in his convoy and the 5 other corvettes that make up his escort force. After 3 years of Atlantic convoy duty, he's learned to read the subtle signs that indicate whether a crossing will be routine or deadly. Radar contact bearing 275 degrees, range 4, 200 yards, reports the radar operator, his voice carrying the tension that comes from knowing that any contact could be a surfaced U-boat preparing to attack the convoy. Classification, Sherwood asks, though he knows that distinguishing between merchant ships, escort vessels and submarines remains one of the most challenging aspects of convoy operations. "Contact is small and moving independently of the convoy," the operator replies. "Speed approximately 15 knots, heading northeast. Could be a submarine on the surface." The radar contact that Gladiolus has detected represents the kind of tactical situation that corvette crews have learned to handle through 3 years of hard-won experience, as they've developed procedures and techniques that maximize their ship's limited capabilities. "Signal the convoy to execute emergency turn to starboard," Sherwood orders. "All escorts to investigate the contact. We'll approach from different bearings to prevent the submarine from escaping." The coordinated response that Escort Group B7 executes reflects the tactical doctrine that corvette crews have developed through countless encounters with German submarines, emphasizing teamwork and mutual support rather than individual heroics. HMS Campanula and HMS Polyanthus are moving to intercept, reports the communications officer. HMS Vervain is maintaining position with the convoy, and HMS Nasturtium is investigating a possible second contact to the north. The division of responsibilities among the escort vessels demonstrates the sophisticated tactical thinking that corvette commanders have developed as they balance the need to investigate threats with the requirement to maintain convoy protection. "Contact is diving," calls the radar operator as the suspicious return disappears from his screen. Last bearing 280 degrees, range 3, 200 yards. The submarine's decision to dive confirms that it was indeed a U-boat preparing to attack the convoy, and its submergence begins the deadly game of cat and mouse that characterizes anti-submarine warfare in the Atlantic. "All ships, commence sonar search," Sherwood orders. "Pattern delta formation, speed 12 knots. We'll box him in and force him to the surface." The sonar search pattern that the corvettes execute represents one of the most important tactical innovations of the Battle of the Atlantic, as escort groups have learned to use their numbers to create overlapping sonar coverage that makes it difficult for submarines to escape detection. "Sonar contact," reports HMS Campanula. "Bearing 285 degrees, range 1, 800 yards, moving southeast at approximately 6 knots. The sonar detection of the submarine begins the attack phase of the engagement as the corvettes move to surround their target and prevent it from escaping or attacking the convoy. Depth charge attack commencing," reports the captain of Campanula as his ship moves into position over the submarine's estimated location. Pattern set for 150 feet, firing in 30 seconds. The depth charge attack that follows represents the culmination of 3 years of tactical development, as corvette crews have learned to coordinate their attacks to maximize the probability of damaging or destroying enemy submarines. "Depth charges away," comes the call over the radio, as Campanula drops a pattern of 10 depth charges in a carefully calculated spread around the submarine's position. The explosion of depth charges in the water creates a massive disturbance that can be felt throughout the convoy, as tons of water and explosive force create shockwaves that can crush a submarine's hull or damage its vital systems. "Good pattern," reports the sonar operator aboard Gladiolus. "Explosions bracket the target area. Contact has changed course and increased speed." The submarine's evasive maneuvers indicate that the depth charge attack has been effective, forcing the U-boat to abandon its attack on the convoy and focus on survival. "HMS Polyanthus is moving in for a second attack," reports the communications officer. "Contact bearing 290 degrees, range 1, 200 yards." The follow-up attack by Polyanthus demonstrates the persistence that has become the hallmark of corvette anti-submarine operations, as escort groups continue to pursue submarines until they are destroyed or driven far from the convoy. "Second depth charge attack commencing," reports Polyanthus. "Target is attempting to go deep, estimated depth 200 feet. The submarine's attempt to escape by diving deeper reflects the desperation of U-boat crews who have learned that corvette groups are far more persistent and effective than early war intelligence suggested. "Depth charges away," calls Polyanthus as her second pattern of explosives enters the water. Pattern set for 200 feet, full spread. The second explosion creates an even more violent disturbance than the first, as the increased depth concentrates the explosive force and creates shockwaves that can be felt for miles underwater. "Contact lost," reports the sonar operator after the explosions fade. "No further movement detected. Target may have been destroyed or has moved beyond sonar range." The ambiguous result of the attack reflects the reality of anti-submarine warfare, where definitive kills are rare, but successful defense of the convoy is the primary measure of success. "Submarine attack repelled," Sherwood reports to the convoy commodore. "All escorts returning to station. Convoy may resume base course." The successful defense of convoy ONS-5 represents one of thousands of similar engagements that corvette crews have fought during the Battle of the Atlantic, gradually wearing down German submarine capabilities through persistent and effective escort operations. "We may not have sunk him," Sherwood tells his crew after the engagement, "but we've sent him home with his tail between his legs. That's one less torpedo aimed at our merchants, and that's what matters." The deterrent effect of effective convoy escort has become one of the most important factors in the Battle of the Atlantic, as German submarine commanders become increasingly reluctant to attack well-defended convoys. The The British escorts are much more effective than they were 2 years ago, observes Kapitan Zorze Karl Dönitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, during a strategic assessment meeting. Their corvettes may be small, but they're persistent, well-coordinated, and equipped with excellent radar and sonar. Attacking their convoys has become extremely costly. The German recognition of corvette effectiveness validates the tactical developments and equipment improvements that have transformed the small escorts from desperate expedients into formidable anti-submarine platforms. The corvettes have evolved, explains the Admiralty's anti-submarine warfare specialist. Better equipment, improved tactics, experienced crews, and most importantly, the confidence that comes from 3 years of successful operations. They're not the same ships that went to sea in 1940. The evolution of corvette capabilities reflects both technological improvements and the accumulated experience of crews who have learned their trade in the most demanding school possible, actual combat against a skilled and determined enemy. We know our ships, we know our enemy, and we know our job, observes Commander Patricia Chen, who now leads one of the most successful escort groups in the Atlantic. The learning curve has been steep, but we've climbed it. The Germans are finding out that cheap and nasty can be very effective when it's properly applied. The confidence that corvette crews have developed through their successful operations becomes a crucial factor in the final phase of the Battle of the Atlantic, as German submarine losses mount and U-boat morale begins to decline. U-boat crews are reporting that British escorts are becoming increasingly aggressive and effective, notes German naval intelligence. Submarine commanders are requesting reassignment to other theaters, and crew morale is declining significantly. The psychological impact of effective convoy escort on German submarine operations proves as important as the physical destruction of U-boats, as the submarine force that once terrorized Allied shipping begins to lose its offensive capability. By the end of 1943, the statistics tell the story of corvette success. Convoy losses have dropped to less than 1% of ships sailed, while German submarine losses have increased to unsustainable levels. The Battle of the Atlantic has been won, declares First Sea Lord Admiral Andrew Cunningham during a review of naval operations. The corvettes and their crews have kept the sea lanes open during our darkest hour and have turned the tide against the U-boat menace. The strategic victory that corvettes have helped achieve validates the emergency shipbuilding program that created them and demonstrates the effectiveness of simple, reliable designs built in large numbers. 294 corvettes built, over 100 zero convoy crossings completed, millions of tons of cargo delivered safely, summarizes the official history of the corvette program. The cheap and nasty approach saved Britain and helped win the war. The statistical record of corvette achievements tells only part of the story, as the human cost of their success includes the crews who endured years of dangerous and uncomfortable service in ships that were never designed for the missions they performed. We did what we had to do, reflects Harold Sherwood during a post-war reunion of corvette veterans. We took ships that weren't good enough and made them good enough. We took a job that couldn't be done and did it anyway. That's what the war required, and that's what we delivered. The legacy of the Flower-class corvettes extends beyond their wartime service to influence post-war naval construction and establish principles of design that emphasize reliability and effectiveness over sophistication and comfort. The corvettes proved that simple designs, properly executed, can be more effective than complex systems that are difficult to build and maintain, concludes the post-war analysis of naval construction programs. Sometimes cheap and nasty is exactly what you need. When the last corvette is decommissioned in 1947, the class has established a record of service that few naval vessels can match. Nearly 300 ships that served in every theater of the war and helped secure the victory that made peace possible. They weren't the ships we wanted, but they were the ships that won the war, observes the final commanding officer of the corvette flotillas. Cheap, nasty, and absolutely essential. The Royal Navy has never built anything more important. The lesson of the Flower-class corvettes isn't just about the effectiveness of simple designs or the importance of building weapons in large numbers. It's about the courage to accept imperfect solutions when perfect ones aren't available. The understanding that reliability and persistence can overcome sophistication and power, and the recognition that sometimes the most effective military systems are those that do one job very well, rather than many jobs adequately. The Corvettes succeeded because their crews understood their limitations and developed tactics that maximized their strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. They proved that cheap and simple could be effective when properly applied by skilled and determined personnel. Their story also demonstrates the importance of persistence in military operations, showing how sustained effort over time can achieve strategic objectives that dramatic individual actions cannot accomplish. Stories like this remind us that the most effective military innovations often come from necessity rather than luxury, that the willingness to accept imperfect solutions can be more valuable than the pursuit of perfect ones, and that sometimes the weapons that win wars are the ones that nobody expected to work. That's what we explore here. The moments when simple solutions prove more effective than complex ones, when persistence overcomes sophistication, when the courage to make do with what you have becomes the key to achieving what seems impossible. If you believe these stories matter, if you want to understand the power of simple solutions and persistent effort, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told with the depth and recognition they deserve. You won't want to miss what we discover next.